But let's move on and talk about supply chains. Who would you say currently has the power, Stuart, in the supply chain?
Well, look, I've, as you know well, I've worked in a number of different bits of a supply chain. Certainly what I do know is the power doesn't sit with the farmer. I think ultimately power will always sit actually with the consumer. But the problem is the consumer doesn't have a way of articulating that power, actually, of exercising that power. So therefore, you do end up with retailers and with processors and with others, if you like, consolidating that power, arguing sometimes on behalf that they're doing it on behalf of the consumer. I'm not sure that is the case. But I also think that what we've seen over the last year, we had, just over 1 million people campaigned and petitioned for standards. Whenever there is news stories around the importance of British food, when I talk to those people who walk through my farm, when I talk to people who for the first time have experienced the farmed landscape that is in this country, the consumer is really, really behind British farming. But what we need to do is make sure, well, that's the key. What we need to do is make sure that we're now able to get them to use that desire, get them to use that power. So ultimately, I think the power does sit with the consumer, but unfortunately, the consumer has not till now been able to make a difference with that power, and there is a bit of it as well. And look, there's an old analogy here that what people say and what they do is different, Charlotte. We've talked about it before. People's mouths are often wider than their wallets are, but we do need to start to see that change. I think we will. I think actually lockdown has really demonstrated a different relationship with food. I think we have seen people have a different relationship with the countryside. We've seen people more engaged. We've seen people asking more questions about where their food's coming from, how it's produced, production standards here in comparison to elsewhere in the world. The big job for John and for I and for every farmer is to make sure that we build on that so that it actually makes a difference when they make a conscious decision at a supermarket shelf, or just as importantly and often forgotten, in a food service, in a pub or in a restaurant outlet.
One of the reasons why we went organic was because, we felt there wasn't enough equality in the supply chain that we were supplying at the time. I thought I would be getting nearer to our customer. And actually, that has happened in some cases. And we have through Organic Arable, we have this fantastic relationship with White's Oats in Northern Ireland, with Sharpen Park before we've grown quinoa for the British Quinoa Company. And so there are lots of niche opportunities for organic farmers as far as getting nearer and getting more equality in the supply chain is concerned, and that needs to continue. The only problem we have at the moment, and the things I'm talking about are things that we get nearer to the end product. But with things like producing animal feed, I think we've got a lot of work to do there in the way that they are still very much focused on imports. And the argument is that there's just not enough organic cereals in this country for them to form relationships with us. But, there's just no effort going into forming those relationships. And I think we've got a lot of work to do on that. I mean, as I said earlier, I've got 800 tonnes of barley sitting in my shed, which is currently unsold because the person that we've had a 10-year relationship with has just decided to import everything before Christmas, destroying my cash flow. So there's work to do in the sector, but I would say that generally, since we've been farming organically, it has brought more equality into those chains, and it was certainly one of the reasons why we converted in the first place.
Is this always going to be the way? Sorry to interrupt you. Is this always going to be the way? Actually, when you're talking about a farmer having more power, you're talking niche or selling direct?
No, I don't think it does necessarily always need to be the way. The problem we've had, and for some time now, we've had long, complex supply chains, okay? And they do nothing to help the farmer, they do nothing to help the consumer, actually. And what we need to see is we need shorter, safer, more secure supply chains. Now, shorter doesn't necessarily mean miles, okay? For me, shortness is the number of steps between me, a farmer, and you, a consumer. And like John, we've worked with 50 or 60 mills up and down the country. Dad was one of the first people really to build those relationships, growing specific grains for specific mills at a good premium. Let's be honest about that, because actually the mill can afford that premium because you haven't got multiple people in the supply chain taking multiple margins, but also, and most importantly, you have a communication channel that's really simple. So miller talks to farmer, and that's really valuable. And I don't see why that can't be the case in other areas. Yes, people always come back to the niche, but actually, why, when it comes to livestock, for example, why don't we have a better system for engaging the communication between the end consumer and the retailer and the farmer back on the ground? At the moment, the primary mechanism, I'm going outside of organic now, but the primary mechanism of communication is the Europe grid, Charlotte, okay? The Europe grid is designed to incentivise me as a farmer to produce the perfect carcass for an intervention store. When did John or I, or probably our previous generations, put a beef carcass into an intervention store? So if we can shorten that, if we can improve the communication, I think it can happen on scale. I don't think it is just niche. But as long as we allow more complicated, longer supply chains to exist and be built, then it will be at the detriment of farmers and ultimately at consumers. There was a really interesting event I did 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually. It was a World Farmers Organization event, but also with the World Consumer Organization. So it brought together farmers from every part of the world and consumers from every part of the world. It took out everyone between those two. And it is unbelievable the similarity in wants and desires between the farmer, wherever you are on the planet, and the consumer, whether that be addressing climate change or whether that be addressing big nutritional issues. But only will it work if we shorten the chain of communication and the physical chain between that farmer and that consumer.
Do you sell direct, John? And if you would you think of selling direct?
Well, actually, we did sell flour direct a number of years ago, but we did it at a time of our lives when Alice and I were both far too busy to be doing that. So actually, we abandoned that. But Alice, this for the last 2 years has sold every single one of our lambs through local butchers, and made a fantastic job. And I think Stuart's point about the kind of quality that actually the market that we're supplying actually wants. I mean, butchers' lambs. I mean, happy days. They actually pay you for every kilo that you produce and don't mind a bit of fat in it, because actually that's just what the customer wants in those sort of in the sort of that market form that they operate in. So definitely, I mean, as far as we're concerned, and talking about the feed industries, our intention to get is to do more direct selling to the public and actually also just get more people on our farm as well. Yeah. And actually, if we think about it and talk about, Stuart was saying, having 4,000 people coming through his farm on Easter Sunday, we have thousands of people who come through this farm every single year. And my God, if I can't think of something to sell them, I might as well just give up today.